Tracy Charette Fehr's latest exhibition is a tribute to her family from 3 historically Métis communities. My Beautiful Family celebrates her early years spent with family, with mixed media pieces that depict her family members, including beadwork and dyed textiles. Tracy Charette Fehr joins us now to tell us more. Hello.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you as well. Maybe to set the scene a little bit for us, you can tell us more about what it
Mhm,
was like to grow up with family in the communities around St. Norbert, La Rochelle, and St. Malo.
mhm. Well, I spent the first 7 years of my life pretty much going every weekend to the farm in La Rochelle, where my family was from. So there was my grandfather, my papa, and we would go out there every weekend, and it was some of the best memories. After I was 7, my mother had passed away when I was 6 and a half, and it was a split at that point. So it's kind of a lot of the work that I'm doing is honoring those early years, honoring the family, some of whom I didn't get to meet and some of whom I did. Some of the photos that are in the exhibit are of my aunties who were always there in those first years of my life. So I think there was a really deep influence that went even beyond the time I was born. There's work in there that was written by my grandmother, and
Wow.
I never actually had a chance to meet her. She died about a year before I was born. So creating this exhibit or this body of work has kind of been a process for me. It's a process of reclamation. It's a process of kind of standing up for my identity as a Métis, um, which I feel was kind of taken, in different
Mhm.
ways. So that comes through in my art. So reclaiming my family has been part of that process.
Maybe you can take us back to that moment of inspiration. I know always
Mhm.
something hard to pin down for artists
Yeah.
in this occasion, but what inspired this desire for your own reconciliation when it came
Yeah.
to getting to be
Mhm.
more knowledgeable and better connected with your family and ancestors?
Well, one of the inspirations was around 2015 when I reconnected with my aunts who now live on Vancouver Island in Port
Mm.
Alberni. Now, I had seen them a couple of times over the years. We'd had big reunions in the 90s, but it was more on an intimate way and really recognized how much they reminded me of my mother. And, there were so many similarities with us where the other side of my family, there wasn't a lot.
Mm.
So there was that, but it was also when I discovered embroidery. It was so funny how that kind of happened. I was in my final year of doing my undergraduate Bachelor of Fine Art, and one of my profs had us do some embroidery on handmade paper, on rag paper that we had made. And I just took to it. I don't know what it was, and maybe it was just another medium, that was really suited to me, but it led to so many other things. It was the thread really
Mm.
that brought me back to all of this other pieces. So my embroidery got me thinking about Métis embroidery, which got me
Mhm.
thinking about the stories about the nuns being the ones that were teaching, girls and women the more European arts. So it took me on a journey of discovering that one, the needle arts existed, Métis embroidery, quill work, beadwork, of course, is part of our tradition. It's part of our history and our culture. So it got me more doing research about that, which took me to travels. So I did some physical research across the country. I went to Quebec. The Ursuline nun, Marie of the Incarnation, was one of the first. She was considered a visionary, but she was also a missionary. Came to New France to educate so-called Indian girls and women. So there's a piece in the show about that. But anyway, it was that, and then it was made me wonder about my aunts and their relationship to the arts, to the material culture of being Métis. So it took me on a bit of a journey. And then it took me to just spending time with my aunts, visiting them, talking to them, recording their stories, taking pictures, going through our family archives and discovering pictures that I hadn't seen before. And it
Mm.
was like these lives were becoming very much forefront. So that's what started that.
As these lives are
Yeah.
becoming more forefront, and at the same time, you're
Hmm.
discovering beadwork for the first
Hmm.
time, an incredible happenstance that all these things are
Hmm.
aligning at the same time in your
Yeah.
life. As you first pick up
Hmm.
beadwork and you're interacting with all of the history of beadwork that you
Hmm.
just outlined, what were those first
Hmm.
pieces like for you as you began in that discipline?
Yeah. Well, I started with embroidery. One of the things I discovered is the Métis were really expert embroiderers. You see some of the works right now by we call them the grandmothers, these historic pieces, and it's exquisite. It's absolutely stunning. You see some of the European influence, but you also see the influence of the land, the type of styles of embroidery, and same as with beadwork. So beadwork also expresses the culture, the land, the colors, how Métis women did decorative work for saddles, for dog blankets, for their husbands or the men and it was just beautiful stuff. So it was me discovering that there's this whole art history that doesn't get recognized in the Indigenous arts as well. So I entered an MFA program at the University of Manitoba, and my supervisor was Catherine Boyer, who's another Métis artist that's very well known and an exquisite bead worker as well. So I took up beading. I would say at one point, I'm not going to bead because everybody that Métis is beading right now. But I'm not an expert bead worker. I would never claim to be. My bead work is more of an interpretation. It's more a way of expressing in a contemporary way our connection to the culture, the land, and I have fun with it. But
Mhm.
there are some
Yeah.
really, really good bead workers out there, and they're wonderful. But I'm more of a contemporary kind of interpreter of that.
There's a lot of fun mixed with intentionality in your work
Yeah.
as I interact with
Hmm.
it here. That intentionality goes
Hmm.
beyond embroidery and beadwork to other
Hmm.
processes that are very intentionally eco-friendly. I'm wondering if you can describe maybe what that looks like when it comes to My Beautiful Family.
Well, what I did is I did a series of portraits and I combined them with a process of eco dyeing, so using natural dyes of the foliage that are natural to our land here. So I did that process. It's a really neat thing, and you never know quite what you're going to get. But I went back to lands that are historic to us. There's a park in St. Norbert called Charette Park. It's just a little park. There's a gas station across the way, and it was our first homestead. It was Charlotte Sandregret and Jean Baptiste Charette that lived there, raised their children and generations. It was also a stopping point for the Métis as they traveled the Pembina Trail. So I took foliage from there, and then from my own home north, which is the other Métis ground, is in St. Andrews, which is more the Scots Métis. But I took foliage and I created these fabrics on linen and cotton, and then I layered them with images of my family members. So you can actually see through the images are kind of clear, so you can see the foliage behind. It's almost like giving us back our identity, our land, bringing those two concepts together because very much when we think about the land, we are part of that. We lost our place in St. Norbert. That's why we ended up in St. Malo and La Rochelle. And my family did have land. A lot of our cousins had nothing. We were poor, regardless. My grandfather was more of a hunter and a trapper than a farmer, although he tried his hand at everything. The women sewed by hand, so a lot of what I've done in there is everything in there is hand stitched. My grandmother would did use a machine. The women worked in sewing factories sometimes to bring in some extra money, and so the sewing is also an expression of the labor of the women. The fur and some of the materials that you see there kind of ground the exhibit, the body of work in the land, the fur trade, which was very much a part of our making in the first place. So the materials have got significance in that way, and then the process of making is also part of our history and our current. It's not just about history; it's about who we are now as well.
as people have been interacting with this history in the present day, as My
Mhm,
Beautiful Family has been on display at La Maison des Artistes
mhm.
in St. Boniface, what has been the reaction that you've heard from people who are interacting with your story, your Métis history, your ancestors, your guided processes?
There's a really a personal experience, I think, in the show, and it can extend beyond the Métis experience of remembering, remembering family, remembering lives. But on an individual level, there was one woman that came to the exhibit who I didn't know, and I took her through. She wanted to go through all of the pieces, and I discussed each one with her. Turned out we had family connections, and she was exploring some of that. So it had a deeper meaning for her as as a guest, as a viewer of. So they're not just looking, they're actually absorbing and taking in, and remember, it's giving them an opportunity to remember. I'll just
Wow.
The other exhibit, which wasn't intended, it was, I think, Luann, she put us together at the same time because she saw some similar story and
Mm,
conversation. So that other one, both of us are speaking to our history, but we're also speaking to the present in both of
yeah.
those.
So that's the audience reaction to this work and
Mhm.
that response. What about your family? What have they been thinking about your art?
It has really been my my younger sisters didn't have some of the experiences that I did. They were born a few years later, so they don't have some of those early memories. So it's reintroducing my family to our family as well. And
Mm,
they're going, "Oh, gee, I didn't realize that. And I didn't know that this was this. And I'd never seen that picture before." So it's also bringing us closer together in a lot of ways. And it's reigniting a pride, or maybe for the first time, igniting a pride that maybe wasn't there before. As
wow.
Métis and as people that weren't treated that well in the community. My aunts have told me stories of how awful it was a lot of the time. If you look closely at some of the pieces, there's words kind of interspersed, words that were used against against Indigenous people, and in this case specifically Métis, like sauvage and ignorante, things that they were called or thought of, and that was part of their experience, which made it difficult for them to continue in school. And,
Mm,
so there was a lot that affected them. So for me, it's also bringing some of that back, maybe bringing some healing back to our family on a personal level and on a historical, because the Charette and the name, there's Charette, there's Nault, there's Lepine, Henry, Laderoux. These are all names in my family uh, histories, and they were proud Métis, and they
wow.
worked alongside Louis Riel. They helped to create the community that was there, but they lost that over time, where they became lived kind of in shame in their own place, in their own community.
Mm.
So I've wanted to change that.
My Beautiful Family is on display right now at La Maison des Artistes Visuels Francophones. We'll have more information about this exhibit at our website, classic107.com, and the Classic 107 app. Tracy Charette Fehr, it's been a real treat to get to know both these works, this exhibition, and your family in this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Marcy, mercy, and thank you.